So I'm back from the dead. No, I didn't really die, but I've had 3 days off the chess channel, unheard of for me. I've not been well, sickness bug in the family, and I actually missed the final Saturday night of the Champions Chess Tour. I was gutted to, but I'm not going to cover that game now. So many channels have covered it, right? Thankfully, they restored that air quality just in time. Now we're picking up here on a game that Magnus played yesterday, 18th of December, against a young 19-year-old international master, a guy called Rud Makarian, Rud for short, sorry, what's his full name? Rudik. Now he's from Georgia and he is a very strong player despite being an IM. Look at his rating here, over 3,000, on his way to Grandmaster, I'd say. Now this is a very special game which I'm going to reveal more about at the end. Let's check it out. Carlsen goes e4 here and we get c5 from his opponent. This is 3-minute blitz chess. They are not holding back with the wild moves. Now we get c3. Magnus going for the c3 Sicilian, or Alapin as it's known. Knight f6, targeting the central pawn. Is it defended? No. We get this little bunny ears move at the side of the board. If the pawn's captured, well bang, you just walked into a double attack. Check on your king and your knight drops off. So don't touch the pawn. Black keeps on developing here. We get bishop d3. There's a weird looking move. But after e5 from black, staking more space in the center, now this bishop tucks back, preparing d4, and this kind of looks akin to a king's pawn game now. You know, not necessarily a Sicilian. Although this pawn's not here, it's here. And after bishop e7, castles, obviously black just carries on developing, What? No steady development. G5 on the board. Let's go. This guy wants to kill Magnus. Love it. Attack the world number one. What does Magnus do? Well, he doesn't touch the pawn. Take it with the knight because you walk into this massive attack with rook g8. The computer says it's technically playable and then you give your knight on f7 and stuff, but it's just nuts. Magnus plays the best move, pawn to d4, and it's a good learning point because when you get attacked on the flank, so often a center counter shot is the way to go. Black carries on with pawn g4 here. Now the engine wants to take this pawn, play it like that, but here Magnus takes on e5, a much more double-edged idea because he allows this, and after he takes, his king is now getting ripped open. There's no time for Magnus to take here, or black takes on f1 with check. That's the key. So the rook goes to e1. You know, you could have taken there with the king, but white actually wants to use black's own pawn as a shield for the time being. So here we see takes on f6. Now there's already an interesting idea here of pawn to e5. Clearance sacrifice just to activate the rook, which is lined up to the king, and this bishop on c2. But Magnus starts with this one, very natural move because he also defends this pawn, and now black sees the idea and lands this knight on a rock solid central square. Wonderful dark squared control here. Now the computer considers f4 to be an okay move, but Magnus, you know, way more principled. He just wants to develop some pieces, stop weakening his king further, and try and get some play of his own. So bishop e6 played, developing. We get knight d2 from Magnus. Let me scroll down here, catch up the moves. Now we get queen d7, preparing to castle queenside, and now Magnus plays a weird looking move. He gives up bishop for knight. Why would you do this and give black this amazing dark squared control? Well, this is the point. Knight f3 now played, and it's a bit uncomfortable. You know, if you retreat to f6 here, you're walking straight into e5. No time for f6, that pawn is pinned, plus never play f6, right? And if you go to g7, it's technically playable, says the computer, but still e5 comes. And when you're trying to castle queenside, having things ripped open here looks risky. Computer says d5, no worries, no issues. Still here, black's a bit better, but scary. So That is why after bishop takes, knight f3, we see castles queenside played, giving a pawn. But it's great blitz chess. You know, you're gaining time. You're getting your king to safety. Now queen c7, you're forcing these ones off the board. Obviously Magnus is going to take. The guy loves an endgame, right? And now, after Magnus picks up his pawn back, well, rook d2, the infiltration. This is what Makarin has seen. Now, how to defend that bishop? Well, it's not so comfortable. Magnus finds the absolute best move, which is rook a to c1. If you go with the other one, you're getting really passive, very tied down. Black starts drumming up a lot of play, especially with the exposed king and the great bishop. So Magnus does this, ditches a pawn, which is taken, but he can now at least activate his pieces. And there's no time for b3, by the way, trying to trap this piece in and, you know, bring a rook across, because obviously you've always got to babysit this one. Just not working. So Magnus instead goes king to f3. The rook's double on the file here, and now Magnus brings the king over. We get bishop c4, re-entering the game, and now b3, puts a question, it drops to e6, and Magnus plays this great move, swapping off this very active, annoying rook on d2. So we get takes, king recaptures, b5, excellent policy, getting the pawns going. f4 from Magnus. Why is no one capturing this pawn? Why is neither player bothered? Well, constantly there's this follow-up tactic of going across here and then picking up the pawn here. Okay, it's now saying bishop g4 check, but certainly if you go back a move or two before b5, the same is true. Anyway, long story short, pawn untouchable. Magnus always gets play with rook h1, rook g1. So b5 played, as mentioned, f4, f6 gives this bishop some room. Maybe f5 is wanted one day. We now get b4 from Magnus, and you can see both players putting pawns on dark squares. It gives their bishops scope, and it stops their pawns from being targeted in the long run. So king b6 prepares a5, king e3. Again, the kings sit nicely on the dark squares. We get pawn a5 played, captures with check, king takes back, but Magnus comes across with the rook. Not so fast, Sonny Jim. Get back to your side of the board, and now h4. Finally, that pawn coming off the dark square. And it's interesting how that one little pawn push makes a difference to the position. Suddenly the engine likes rook g8 and h5 and rook g4, and it just gives black a small edge here. You know, this bishop's slightly superior to this one, which is staring at its own pawn. Subtle stuff. But b4 was played instead. Not a bad move, but slightly impatient. Now we get bishop d3. Sneaky, tricky Magnus. He's setting up this rook a6 check. King moves, then you drive across and snap off the bishop. So that's why rook d6 was played, responding. But it wasn't the most precise. King b7 better, or king c5, or bishop g8. There's a weird looking move. The problem with this one is e5, which Magnus finds, and look at that. You're picking up a tempo on the rook, and after it stays on the c file here, or the 6th rank I should say, to stay with the bishop, well now Magnus wins a clean pawn. He's won to the good. Is it going to be enough? Well, rook c3 check played. Black's pieces are very active, so the computer still gives this a technical draw, but they want to start checking here. Not the way that was selected. b3 was played instead. Such a natural move. Now we get pawn h5. Rook h3 coming behind. Still decent defense. King g5 now from Magnus. b2 on the board. The rook slides. Rook h2 covers the pawn. And this one is on the way. So h6 from Magnus. He pushes his pawn. Bishop a2 played, rook g1, and now here, if black goes rook e2, it's very tough to make progress. You know, according to the engine, I didn't click super deep, but we get king c5 played, very natural idea, but Magnus starting to creep ahead here in the advantage. We get bishop f5, clearing the way for the h-pawn to run. King d5 played. Rook e1 now comes behind the pawn. Magnus in prime position here. And now what does the computer want to do? Well, rook g2 check, king f6, rook f2. And this is crazy because surely h7 is just winning the game. Well, no, this is what the Silicon Overlord shows us. You can take this bishop with check, make a queen with check, rook takes, bishop takes with check, and you're skewering that king to pawn. Amazing line, and black holds the draw. Wow. But, okay, rook g2 check and then coming here, none of that stuff found. Instead, the queen was made immediately, but Magnus takes, bishop takes. Now he takes with the rook. We get king takes on e5, and unbelievably, this is a one endgame. Looks like it shouldn't be, because after the king's checked away, rook g1, king e7, king g6, king f8, normally this king's coming back just in time, because it's an h-pawn, not another kind. You know, say you go rook g3, bang, you throw the win. Now if you check, you go to the corner, nothing white can do. You know, if you try this one, well, you just start checking from behind infinitely and then take the pawn if white goes too far away. But there's a problem. After king f8, Magnus doesn't go rook g3, of course. He pushes the pawn. And that little pawn takes away this critical square. The king covers this one. There are no checks behind. Just exemplary endgame play. So rook h3 played, we get check, the king driven back, now rook f5, Magnus building the bridge as they call it, classic Lucena position play, although often that's with the rook on the 4th and the king on the 5th, but okay, we get rook h1 now waiting. What to do, by the way, if you check? Well, you just move the king and check and block, pawns going through. But what we saw in the game was the rook waiting on h1. Now Magnus closes the trap by bringing the rook here, and we saw resignation. If you check, the king hides. If you take, we take, pawn goes through, that's game over, of course. Now, why is this game special? Well, with this victory, Magnus has now set a new all-time record on chess.com. Check this out. He played this young 19-year-old IM 6 times, farmed him, so to speak, you know, just picking up 2 points per game. He's now gone 33-63, still pushing all-time highs. I wonder what Kramnik's got to say about this one. And on Kramnik, by the way, he's done yet another blog post recently, but to be honest, I can't even be bothered to go into all the details of that one. I'll link below if you fancy a read. Now Magnus, I'm hoping will be playing Title Tuesday later. I guess we'll see. Can he start pushing towards 3,400? Can you imagine? You suspect he's got it in his sights, right? Anyway, hope you enjoyed. Do subscribe if you haven't done so already, and check out the video on screen for another epic game of chess. See you soon.